I know that David does not like my shirt, but I'm okay with that because we all have different personalities of different things and all that. You know, I have a unique personality. I'm also wearing Toy Story socks with Woody the Cowboy on them, if you're interested in that. So we all have our different quirks, and I think a nice bushy mustache next week will complete the Magnum PI look, and maybe or maybe not. That's the way it is. As I alluded to last week, I had some troubles with my mouth. And not in the usual way I get into trouble with my mouth. I ended up with a very, very bad infection in my gum and in my jaw, which led to a very sore, oozing abscess that required some minor surgery. I was on 2 very strong and very hard on the gut, still feeling the pain from that, antibiotics, but they didn't even make a dent in it because the abscess simply needed to be drained. So it kept growing, it kept spreading, I had pain, I had numbness all the way above my left ear, down to the bottom of my chiseled chin here. I was on some very heavy pain medication, which barely made a difference, and I ended up having to stop taking them, because you can only take them for so long, switch to the normal stuff every couple of hours. My poor liver needs a vacation. But I needed to see an oral surgeon. The wait times for these guys, they're horrible. Some are waiting months to see them, which is just awful. So I finally ended up last Friday going to the hospital, and after a relatively short wait time there, I got in to see a nice emerge doctor who tried to freeze it. Got a lot in my mouth. Novocaine does not taste very good. I tried to drain some of the abscess. I felt every long needle going in there. But the infection, he tried to draw it out. It was so far down in my mouth, he just couldn't touch it. And so he reached out to the oral surgeon on call and told me to go and scooch over to his office immediately. Hannah was with me. She drove. She engaged the hyperdrive in the RAV4, and we booked it across town. And I got to stick my head in this really cool scanner. It was quite like Star Trek. And then Dr. Habby walked in. He's not retired anymore. He peeked at the x-ray when he walked in, and he sounded excited. He's like, "Oh, a very large abscess." He was just like all pumped, ready to go. So more freezing, a little bit of chit-chat, while it took hold. And then he proceeded to slice that sucker open. He dove in with some kind of tool. He was like an Olympic diver from the high diving board. Just whoosh! And he squeezed and poked all that gook out that had been causing all my problems. I could feel the pressure being relieved. It was a teaching day at the clinic that day, so there was about half a dozen future dentists there, all leaning over my head watching. Some of them with kind of looks of amazement, others were somewhat horrified, I think. But the relief was instantaneous. The pressure was gone. My mouth was sore. It still is sore from all of those needles and the cutting and the squishing. But to get out that infection was so much what I needed to happen. I needed someone to go in deep, someone who knew what they were doing, in deep where the issues were, and to deal with things so that the antibiotics could work and my jaw could finally begin to heal. As we put on our Indiana Jones hats and we continue our adventure through the Gospel of John today, we're going to advance now a few more verses along into this incredible conversation that we have been witness to by Jesus. Now, I don't know where you are, how far along in your faith journey that you are right now. But I hope that you have been discovering the uniqueness of the words and the teachings of Jesus. The Bible is an incredible book filled with all sorts of truth and knowledge. But I hope that you're learning that there are parts that just hold more importance to us today. I mean, it's great to have access to the Old Testament scriptures to be able to draw so much insight into what ancient Israel experienced. We can learn a lot about the nature of God and his heart for his people, his concern for their sin. But while we can be encouraged by much of it, we can learn a great deal, a lot of it just doesn't really compute in our brains today. And honestly, it just can't be connected to and transferred into our lives today. See, the covenant law that God had made with Israel provided with them many, many moral guidelines that are again taught in our New Testament, but quite a bit of it really no longer applies. The washing ceremony that the priests did back then before doing their duties. That might teach us about how holy that God really is and the separation that sin caused between us. But you can't go and use this to say that, well, that means that we should dress up and get all pretty to go to church. That's not remotely the same thing. Most of you probably have no issues today with being tempted to boil baby goats in their mother's milk anymore, right? Or at least I hope you don't. But it was a worship practice to the false gods from another country back then that the Israelites were often being drawn to. And sure, today we could talk about how much idolatry is still very present in most of our lives. You likely don't lie awake at night stressing about your struggle, about whether you should trim the sides of your beard. But that was how a Jewish male identified themselves as being a follower of God. And there are certainly ways that we can look at and how we identify today as followers of Jesus. So there's ways to connect things, but much of it was written at a specific time to a specific nation of people. It was a covenant to them and for them, and it was completed by Jesus when he died on the cross. And so whenever you jump into the Bible, I hope you're learning to see that there are parts of it that hold more weight to your life today. It is all equally inspired, sure, but some parts are more applicable. I hope that makes sense. But the words that Jesus spoke, and subsequently the teachings that his apostles did afterwards, hold a formidable amount of importance for us today. Jesus became the bridge between God's people of the Old Testament and its laws and its people today. And his teachings often pointed those people listening to the truths found within, showing them that in order to see those truths, they needed to get past all of the unimportant stuff on the surface and to look deeper. We pick up in John chapter 7, verses 19 and 20. Jesus is talking. He says, Moses gave you the law, but none of you obeys it. In fact, you are trying to kill me. And the crowds replied, you're demon-possessed. Who is trying to kill you? Now, it was smart for Jesus to use the name Moses here. That name held a lot of weight to his audience. He was the guy. He was the guy that God called into the leadership of the nation, to come to guide them out of slavery in Egypt, to shepherd them in all those years in the wilderness, and then to present to them the very words of God, his law, so that they could know him and they could know the path that he wanted them to be on. But the law that was presented was given for a twofold reason. Yes, it was to provide the people with a compass, a set of moral and ethical guidelines for them to follow and to be an example to all the other nations around them. Because of our fallen human nature, the paths that we often default to are ones that usually bring disaster, right? For some reason, we have a hard time learning from history, but virtually every nation that became a strong and prosperous world power, think about it, they no longer exist today. They have been wiped out, not usually because they were overthrown, but because their moral decay, their lack of values, it all caused them to crumble from within. With no foundation, with no guidance, there was nothing to hold up that society. And the same is true today when we look around at the world powers around us. The further they leave God in the past, in the dust, we don't need him anymore. We don't need that. Well, things just look darker. They look more bleak. I could rant on that for a while. But the law was given to keep Israel from becoming that. But it was also given to show the people that their relationship with God was broken. And that because of the vastness and the complexities of that law, it was actually impossible to fix that relationship themselves simply by trying to keep all of it. A good person could not become good enough by trying to be good enough. And Jesus points that out to his listeners here. He says, you have the law, but you don't keep it. Remember one of those top 10 commandments that God gave? Don't murder? You are trying to kill me. Now, the immediate crowd in front of him were probably confused by that statement. He said, we're not trying to kill you, Jesus. You're crazy. But there were plenty of people in that crowd who understood who those words were meant for. The religious leaders, they were plotting the death of Jesus for quite some time now, rationalizing in their brains to themselves that it was for the good of the many to keep him quiet. And how easy it was to ignore such a key part of God's law in order for their own agendas to be maintained. He continues on. Jesus replied, I did one miracle on the Sabbath, and you were amazed. But you work on the Sabbath too, when you obey Moses' law of circumcision. For if the correct time for circumcising your son falls on the Sabbath, you go ahead and do it, so as to not break the law of Moses. So why should you be angry with me for healing a man on the Sabbath? Look beneath the surface so you can judge correctly. I remember a while back, Jesus was at that pool, and he went up to the man who was crippled. I had never walked a day in his life, and he told him to get up and to walk, and he did. Well, it was from that point on that his death was being planned by the religious leaders. Why? Because the day he performed this miraculous healing on was the Sabbath. And instead of having their jaws drop and their minds blown to the fact that a guy who hadn't been able to move under his own power in over 40 years, that when Jesus popped on the soundtrack to Footloose, he got up and he boogied. It was incredible to see this power of healing. But all these people could do was narrow their gaze and furrow their brows and think, man, that was too much like work. And it's a Sabbath. And you're not allowed to work on the Sabbath. Excuse me. And so they decided they needed to take this guy out. I mean, it seems crazy to think like that. But it happened. And so Jesus teaches a bit here to explain this. He says, think about it. The purpose of God giving you the Sabbath was to give you rest. But if your son is born, and if the day you're supposed to circumcise him, which was the 8th day afterwards, if it falls on the Sabbath day, you still do that, right? Of course. Because that's the day the law tells you to go and get it done. It's not work, it's just doing the right thing. And by saying this, Jesus drives home his point. If you want to make the right choices, you want to make the right judgment calls, then look at things. Look at people, not just on the outside, but below the surface. My milk problems could not be dealt with until someone was willing and able to get in under what appeared to be the problem and to really get to where the issue was down deep. Once a young man approached Jesus with a question. He was an expert in the law, basically a religious lawyer. And he wanted to test Jesus, and so he asked him which commandment was the greatest one of all. Which one was the most important? Of over the 600 plus rules and regulations, Jesus, which was the primary one? To which Jesus responded, yeah, I can sum up the whole law for you. But it's actually a twofold command. You can't have one without the other, and you can't truly do one without doing the other. The first one is to love God with everything. Your whole heart, your whole soul, your whole mind. And then also go and love your neighbor as yourself. Put others above and beyond you. Because a person simply cannot claim that they love God if they're unwilling to love his people, his children. I've got a buddy, Joel, that I get along really well with. We have similar interests, by which I mean we both like to watch shows that take place in space. I'll leave it at that. We talk about Star Trek. We discuss plot issues and time travel paradoxes and character development that actually happens, all right? And I really enjoy our conversations. I have other friends that I do coffee with. We talk about church and ministry and all sorts of theological things. We share, we laugh, we have a good time. My dogs, they are the very best dogs in the world. They are always happy to see me. They sit at my feet every time I eat for some reason, and they are smiling. They physically smile in the window when I come home, and they are wagging their tails. And you know something? It's easy to love being around some people and some animals. The ones that you connect with. The ones that you get along with, the ones that you like, but others, honestly, not so much, right? There are some that drive you crazy. Others who irritate you and make you wish that you owned a taser, right? While others and their lifestyles that they lead, they go against the core of your faith, of what you believe in. The growth of a person, specifically the growth of a disciple of Jesus, can be observed and measured by the love we have for our neighbors, all of our neighbors. The day I sat at emergency, I was obviously the person there in the most amount of pain, all right? So I felt like I should be placed, priority and pushed ahead of others. But there was this older lady who had come in. She was wheeled in, and she looked like she had taken an awful fall. Her hand was all white bandaged up. Her face was all bloody and bruised down here on her chin. And when I saw her, I felt just awful for her. Tears actually came to my eyes, and I prayed for her there and then. I texted my family chat to tell them about her. I said, I'm really overtired probably because they know I'm not a crier, all right? That's just the way. But hopefully reactions like that are signs of Jesus working on me, showing me that, I need to care about others and not just focus on me. Now, I'm far from perfect. There was also a kid there zooming around in a wheelchair, blowing up rubber gloves and sticking them on her head that I wanted to throw out a window. I'm a work in progress. But as we grow in our faith, as we learn what it means to follow Jesus, the more that we look under the surface of other people. And we begin to see less of what's on the outside. the rough exterior, the obvious bad choices that they've made in their life, the lifestyle that they're leading, and we begin to see them. A child of God, looking for something, for meaning, trying to fill a God-sized hole in their heart with stuff that just repeatedly leaves them no meaning and offers no hope. It is so much easier to just take in what we see and to write people off, isn't it? It's easier for us to not care because it means that we can focus more on us, right? But the truth in what Jesus teaches and in the example he gave us is that he came to show us a very different way, a much better way. All the religious leaders could see is that Jesus broke the law. And he was guilty in their minds, and they were willing to break another law, a pretty big one, in order to keep him and keep things in line. It's a crazy concept, but not that much different when we fail to look deeper into other people, past their outward appearance, past their mistakes, past their dumb choices, and we decide to ignore the person within who is simply dying to experience the love of God shown to them through the love of one of his followers. Let's pray. Thank you for this amazing example, God. For Jesus coming down and coming to seek out those who were so broken, so wrecked, and so lost. People like us, and people, Father, who were just on the outskirts of civilization and society because of their choices, of their lifestyles, shunned by so many around them. Thank you for his willingness to teach us how to love everybody. Love everybody before, more than ourselves. And proving that love by climbing on that cross and dying for our sins. Help us to be learning every day from that example, God, and allowing your Spirit to work within us to become more and more like Jesus, showing your love to the world. In his name we pray. Let's stand one more time. I search the world, they couldn't fail me. A man's empty praise and treasures of faith are never enough. much for being here today. Hope it's been a blessing to you, to your life, and to your walk with Jesus. Let's go into this world and to share his love with others. Hope to see you all next week. Enjoy that beautiful sunshine that we're going to get someday. Amen.